Afternoon, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here, to have you all here. They are not necessarily agreeable. It's always great to remember things that occurred before the pandemics, and we hope we will have a new normal. I'd like to thank Mr. Marina Silva. I am going to pay an honor to her and wear this mask to avoid any risk of contamination. And I'm sorry, we are having a little problem with the microphones. I think they should get the microphones improved there, but I'll try to do my best here. The importance here is evident. So that I will not transmit any virus on my part, I would like to pass the word to the president of the curators from the Fundação Henrique Cardoso, Mr. Sergio Fausto. Then we will have the intervention of Minister Marina, about 20 minutes each, and then there will be a possibility for the audience to ask questions. Questions should be asked in writing. So at some point you will get a QR code here on the screen, and then you will be able to ask any questions. This is a hybrid event. There are people watching us on YouTube, and we have those on YouTube. They are receiving the simultaneous translation. And here I'd like to thank everyone for having come here. This is an international event, and there are people who are watching us outside Brazil. And people who do not understand can follow the translation. Those who are watching us on Zoom, you have a possibility of choosing interpretation there. There is a globe at the bottom of your screen, and you can access the translation to here. And Celso, please, the floor is yours. I am sorry, I am not getting the audio from the audience. We have the Minister Marina Silva at the moment, and the President and I personally, we have great admiration for the Minister, who is so significant that I won't have to say anything else. I'd like to do a personal comment. In between the discussions, I am sorry, we are not getting the audio from Mr. Laffer. And she is also an expression that of a person who had the competence to face incredible problems. The same goes for the president of the central bank, and EBIT can take forward in the international plan a lot of this competence and to make theory into action. This is the theme in excellence in an international year. So that's why we are thanking the representation of the European Union and Brazil and countries that have also taken part, such as Canada, Spain, Finland, Israel, Sweden, Switzerland, and other lower countries. And this shows not only the relevance of this topic to the specificity of what's going to be discussed, but also it is a very important international theme, which has become the theme of the themes in which Amazon has a key role. And Sergio has already introduced it all to us. We are going to follow the order here. Ilan will do a first exposition, then the Minister Marina, and then we are going to have a debate here. Ilan, please. Okay, I'll share the microphone here with Sergio. Okay. Yes, we have to speak closer to the microphone. Unfortunately, if they don't speak on the microphone, it's not possible to translate. They have to speak on the microphone. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you to share this space with the Minister Marina Silva. And as Celso has already introduced her very well, we have met outside Brazil as well. It's a pleasure to be here. It's amazing to be in a panel and be able to talk in Portuguese. It's really good for me. Thank you so much for the invitation, Sergio Fausto. And we have been in so many occasions together. And of course, I want to express my admiration for Professor Celso, who has devoted his life and mostly recently in our conversations, even before I was responsible for IBID. Today, I'd like to talk about 3 subjects. The first one, what we are watching in terms of the moment for the Amazon. Why does it seem to be a good moment for what we call increasing our ambitions, do more? And then I will talk about what BID has been doing, the development bank, even before I arrived here at the bank, how has it organized itself, examples of what has been done already, and last but not least, what is the idea forward? So let me start talking about why now. First of all, there is a new moment in the region and in the rest of the world. We have new political initiatives. We have a new advantage in the region. And here I am talking about the 8 Amazonian countries. Of course, there is Brazil. There is also in Colombia, where you see it more clearly. But also in the other countries with which we are in contact. The political issue, of course, is according to the wish to preserve the Amazon, and not just only with this question of wanting to preserve the Amazon, but also Amazon and its economy, Amazon and its cities. So this perception has been in our minds more and more with regards to the region. Outside the region, there is a perception that the moment is now as well. I would like to thank Professor Celso. He has mentioned the many guests who are here, the European Union, the many countries whose representatives are here. They are the same countries which are part of our Amazon initiative. They are the donors of this initiative. For those who don't follow the work of IBID, it's the natural connection between the region. There are 26 countries in which EDB has a presence, and there are other 22 countries which are members and who do not belong to our region here. And with regard to Amazon, all interests are gathered. All the interests, those who are from the region and those who are not. And BG brings this new political moment in contact with this new moment with the rest of the world. Why now? Because both in here and outside here, the window that we have, the gap that we have, is becoming smaller, is closer. With regards to global warming, for example, is an example. I have been dealing with countries for more than 6 months now, the countries of the region in which, when I arrived there, I knew there would be a lot of interaction with the Caribbean countries because they have many natural issues at the moment. We would have to have an emergency fund, but we have had the worst drought in Argentina in 100 years. Lack of water, water scarcity in Uruguay, in Chile. So yes, that's an example. So let's think about the North, United States and Canada. Those in Washington have also suffered with all the burnings that they couldn't breathe because of the burning that was going on also in Canada. So the global warming has reached the region. There is no need in any talk with any authority to mention this closing of the window of opportunities that we are having now. So it's a global political moment. And this window is closing. And we have a new administration now, which wants to place the Amazon as a priority that would fit many different areas. We want to work with regional projects in many countries, and that is a comparative advantage of an international institution to work with many countries at the same time and help this integration. And of course, the Amazon is clearly a regional project in which we can advance in that area. Obviously, the climate issue, biodiversity, is one of the 3 priorities that from the beginning I set in my agenda. Of course, the social issue, the social question. I'm not going to mention every detail that encompasses that. I call this core bid or nuclear bid because we have to do it because it's more and more relevant. And it does not substitute the second point, which is the climate question and the preservation of nature. And the last point is, of course, an investment in infrastructure, physical, digital. So this is the first point. Why now? The second one is, what is the moment that we are living? What is happening now? The first diagnosis that we have, as you know, the Amazon territory has 60 million inhabitants, 3 million indigenous people. Amazon occupies 40% of the South American territory. 63% of the Amazon is in Brazil. Amazon furnishes more than 40% of fresh water of Latin America, and water is another important chapter. I have been in ONU talking about water as well. So this is another objective for 2030. 40% of the inhabitants of the Amazon is below poverty line, and most of the cities have hardly any basic sanitation services. They require these services. In terms of economics, bank has to look at the facts, economic factors that affect this region. So the situation there has to change. It has an initiative, and I don't know if it is a lack of originality, but it's called the Amazon Initiative. And I say that because by the end of the time I speak, there are many different initiatives with many different names, and there are many also called Amazon Initiative, as we have seen at FAPESP. So there are many initiatives, and when you have a regional look at it, there are many regional initiatives which are very similar. Some are a little different, but you can see that it's all being scattered there. And the problem is we don't have the time, the energy, or the resources for each of them to do different things in 10 areas. The name of the game now is scalability and speed. And for scale, you need focus. And to have focus, you need to prioritize, and you need to organize and you need to try. So what we want to contribute is that all those initiatives may have at least a regional look, and we can organize them. All initiatives are valid, but we can talk about them. Could we talk about them and perhaps look at the resources each one has and think in a more aggregated way, a more macro way? So the bank has this alternative, the Inter-American Development Bank. The initiative has been constituted. We have some resources that come from donors, again, our members, which have become part of that. But the idea is that we want to create a unity. Here we have Tatiana, one of the leaders. She came to EDB, and of course we want to have a holistic view where you have to look after the issues of control, of climate control, and also biodiversity, but you also have to deal with alternative economic factors. You have to also take care of people, the communities, the indigenous people, the people who live there. They have to be at the center. So the IDB also talks about structure, and we also have to consider working with diversity, gender issues. So these are transversal questions. So the idea is that many different areas have some initiatives, such as creating a consulting commission to represent these groups, to make partnerships. In terms of finances, we have 3 different funds that have been funded: Fundo de Capital Semente, Bioeconomy. I know some of you also work with these funds. There are some ambassadors here, and the Multi-Donors Fund. And at the end of the day, in terms of resources, we have 430 million in resources. Those of you who are used to billions, please, I want to repeat again, it's millions, not billions. There is a difference between millions and billions in terms of resources that we have, the grant that we have, the donation money that we have. In terms of loans, billions, and needs are trillions. So this is how more or less it is divided here. So we have the fund. The fund can also reach billion, and there are many initiatives. We can mention many of them, how each initiative can contribute to the indigenous communities, selling tokens online. And that is an important partnership with Pará, for example, where you look at control the climate plan, you look at their business plan, and how you are going to use the instruments that you have. And we have an initiative in Colombia, which is to develop a plan for deforestation with the Colombian government. So there are many projects where these already exist. So the question is, if these projects already exist, the initiative already exists and has resources, why shall we think about a new program? And the regional program, this would be like an umbrella program. The first time we talked about this regional program, and then we said we need a name for this. And Marina commented, why don't you call it Amazonas Amazonia Forever in Brazil? And then she said, siempre. Siempre is forever in English, but siempre is in Spanish and sempre in Portuguese. So sempre Amazonia, to have this. The bank is ready to help the different kinds of partnerships in Brazil regarding issues. We have had the action plan to prevention and control of deforestation in the Amazon, PCDAM, and there are 4 axes in that one. I know that one of them is economy. The 4th one has to do with instruments or tools, norms, and we are working and thinking about economic activities and also financial instruments that might help us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about financial instruments that we can contribute in the Amazon. Public resources are limited. Even the international ones are limited for development banks. Of course, you can do better, and that's what we are trying to do. We are trying to take a little bit more risk and try to extend it, but we have to think in a smart way of using the resources that we have. We will need resources that come from the private sector, and we have to use the public resources to be able to complement the private resources that will come in. There are many instruments that can incentivize, motivate, and you need the public resources to place an incentive at the right time, the right place. For example, we have financial instruments that award when a certain indicator or index has been reached. I'm going to give an example here, which is not Amazon. A bonus, for example, issued by Uruguay. Matthias, my colleague here, has worked on that. Okay, so there's a bonus for the private sector, but if you reach a certain index number for deforestation, the cost of your debt drops. So how can it drop? You use the public resources, the donation at the right time, which is the time the indicator shows you. Or we have, in exchange for that, for climate actions or the defense of nature. About 2 months, the biggest exchange of that for preservation of nature was done with the help of EDB, where Equator exchanged the debt for resources that will be used in Galapagos. So through guarantees, that was the right moment to use the resource. Through our guarantees, the American government guarantees as well, so that there could be an exchange for a risky debt through a risk-free debt. And so there are many instruments as such that can be used, including looking regionally, if we could issue an Amazon bonus, for example, through IDB. So there are many ideas for instruments that we can think about. So this umbrella, and I'll end here, would have a financing side, see all the sources that are available. Each will look after their own funds, and we can think if we can bring in more. Number 2, we have to help in terms of technical education projects that are resources for technical assistance, which are there for that. And we have just to come in, not saying just you have to do it, but be part of doing it. And you need to have a knowledge, you need to know the initiatives, you need to know what has worked and what hasn't, and what can we do together. So IDB can create a platform within the region to have many partners in which you can participate through different initiatives. So to finish off, I'd like to conclude that the idea is not to substitute efforts, but establish dialogues amongst everyone, learn with each other, and create an impact. And to increase impact, it's very important that we do it together. The idea is to be collaborative, efficient. We have the next presidential cell in BN, maybe this is an excellent opportunity for us to talk and bring in the members who are not regional members, donors, and so that they can participate with us in an event, a parallel event, and be working with us. We have had a very good talk with all in our meeting in Panama, and we are going to be meeting many ministers to talk about that, what we can do in terms of resources, in terms of economy to help this initiative, and the presidents who are bringing in the environment ministers and bringing in the guide. And we are helping in the economic part. So I'd like to thank you all. Thank you for the opportunity. It is really a pleasure to be here. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like just first of all to greet the organizers of this important meeting from the Fundação Fernando Henrique Cardoso. Sergio, thank you so much for having invited us and also for being for sympathizing with me in terms of precaution. Professor Celso Laffer, thank you for being here leading this process. Ilan, we have met before in other occasions, and we have had a long conversation, and we talked about this name, Amazon Forever. The only way we can catch the actions if we have Amazon Forever. What is the industry that will have Amazon forever? So what is the industry? What is the kind of industry here in Brazil that is going to help Amazon to remain forever? Infrastructure and so on and so forth. So it was an exercise, and the countries which are here, of course, with all their representatives, Canada, uh, Spain, Israel, other countries, and many other partners who are here. I'd like to thank everyone who is here. Sueli has been a president at IBAMA. She has helped me a lot, always during the transition, and she has brought, and Joaquim Levy as well, who I happened to see here, that has helped us with the Amazon Fund, because at that time it wasn't so easy to understand what we were proposing. And I always try to find advocacies and competent people to sometimes translate what we can't always translate ourselves. And Joaquim has been one of these persons who has helped me in Capobianco and Tasha Azevedo in that effort. And the Amazon Fund maybe is one of the most creative instruments to be able to receive resources for quick actions with a quick return. This was an innovative fund who is now receiving the support of many partners. I have received a very instigating theme, which were initiatives for a sustainable Amazon. And I think William has mentioned the moment, why we have this moment, this window that we can go through now. And we are living this moment now, and that maybe there won't be any other in time. So I'd like to place a few questions here for us to think about. For us to think about initiatives that will take the Amazon and take it to the level of becoming sustainable, it is essential that we think what what are we truly approaching? What is the specificity of that? And this has to be within a frame that all these efforts from the scientific social communities from the financial sector, from the private sector. They can all, also from international partners, they might all converge to results which are indeed significant. And this has to do with government action. I hear people saying, well, to make investments, we need to have security, we need to have security for the investments. And the public sector helps in this security that people are looking for. That's why since the first government by President Lula, when I was a minister, we thought about a frame that could help organize this for great transformations, trying to reach a sustainable model, not just to the Amazon, but to any biome, not on all biomes, not only to Brazil, but all countries in the Amazon. And I think our challenge today with the loss of biodiversity, climate change, and the consequences of all that around us here, the great challenge is to establish a new frame for work. And what would that be? Would that be to have a political policy that would first include society? In a democracy, this is almost impossible to do politics for people. You have to do politics with people, with the community, the scientific community, with the different political forces, because it will not just be one party that will remain in power. So we have to do that with investors, and it is to do with them, not for them. And this helps us because the intelligence of many is incomparably higher than just a few's intelligence. That's the way it happens if it's going to last. One thing that is difficult to understand is when you talk about strengthening the system in Brazil. There comes the people of command and control. It's not just command and control. And I am aware of that since always, let's say. We're not going to protect all the different kinds of biosystems that we have just with IBAMA and the federal police. This is valid not only to Brazil, but also to all the other countries here who are part of the Amazon. We are talking about a common effort, but if we don't have a national environmental system which is structured and able to select, it is very hard for us to establish what is right. It's very hard to compete with illegals. So I could verify people who had good intentions, they were competent, and they were very determined in trying to do reforestation in the Amazon. They acquired areas, they searched for technical knowledge, they did all they could to do everything correctly. But then they saw that their investments were competing with those who were unfortunately deforesting the Amazon within public land, within lands which were not theirs, without paying taxes. So without following the rules, impossible. There were some people, oh, wow, I have just seen someone here. I don't see so well. Oh, you see, I had a secretary of biodiversity, a former secretary of biodiversity here. Wow. So when I was a minister, we bet on this guideline of strengthening a national system for the environment. And we had 725 operations with the federal police. We did 25 big operations with federal police and IBAMA, and we arrested 725 people, 125 out of which were unfortunately IBAMA's employees, because many people left other regions where there was a lot of wood being explored there selectively, in criminal way, and they would do it. They would do something with the certificates. Why? because an explorer, a person who has a concession that has a certification of SFC, if they are fined or penalized, they lose this certification. So these people were not supervising the criminals, but on the other hand, we're trying to blackmail those people who are doing it all correctly. If you don't clean that kind of problem, there is no investment that's going to be sustainable, because on the one hand, you have people investing, people who are there acting for the good of everyone, but there is a part, and it is not small, that resists to all changes and does everything to hinder the correct ways. The guideline for sustainable development, it is a reality that imposes itself as an economic need, as a political need, as an ethic imperative to the world, but mostly for our region, because here it is still possible to do it differently. We have something about 600 million inhabitants. These 600 million inhabitants in a vast territory, comprehensive territory, with mineral resources, hydric resources, fertile soils. We have biodiversity. Only thinking about natural resources, we have an incredible cultural development here, and we have a certain technological basis that we can exchange with others. And we have a lot of wealth that has not been exploited yet. We have, for example, we retain 12% of the fresh drinkable water, just to mention a few of the resources that we have. We have a lot of rain as well. So we are a potency for the big challenges of furnishing uh, chain supply chains in the world. And it's an imperative, because the world has pressured uh, their natural resources. But here in Brazil, we still have many of those. So if we are not going to use this wisely, using them with high technology associated with traditional knowledge, looking for a new prosperity circle, we are going to be depriving ourselves of great opportunities and the world of inaugurating, releasing a new concept that may start as of now. I do not risk to talk about economy because I'm not an economist, but the traditional economy has created a concept of externalizing. The problems are the externalities, negative externalities. It is as if they were not part of the investments, but the planet is just one. There is no external, everything is internal. What I do here will count to the whole of the planet. And I think we can launch a positive externality concept. The world needs energy supply. We are the region and the country. And I will be giving the emphasis to that. We want that to be a regional effort, a global effort. But the world needs energy. Brazil has a very important clean electric matrix, source of second generation electricity generation. The second generation type of energy, we can become great investors of the third generation energies. Germany, for example, which is a highly technological and industrialized country, has a problem with energy, which is even worse now with the situation in the Ukrainian war. So these countries which have problems with regards to change their energy matrix due to objective reasons, they may find in Brazil a great ally. We may, with second generation energy, produce a third generation energy, and green hydrogen is a great investment. The world will need food safety, and we can be the country that will supplementary be the address for the supply of proteins, grains, and so many advantages that we have comparatively, and that may be transformed into competitive advantages. And I want to invent a little bit more. I don't think it is just an issue of competitive advantages. We need to have distributive competitiveness, and we will distribute these advantages. The world needs grains. Okay, so we can supply that because we have sun, we have water, we have fertile soil, but we need to be able to become this agricultural potency. We have high productivity, we have a highly profitable agro business, but that is a part which doesn't want to increase that and continues using enormous areas for low productivity in the detriment to the substance and the form of what should be the Brazilian production. So sustainable development is alternative investment in the productive sector in this area, but also in the investment area, creating green bonuses and making all efforts, because the government alone will not be able to do that transition. And another question, which is part of this frame, is the transversal environmental policy. I started this theme 20 years ago, but I think I wasn't understood at that time. But now I don't know if it is understood, but I see this theme being practiced today, nowadays, in Lula's government, when he says that the climate change is a highly important issue. And I see 28 ministers there, ministries there having actions related to climate change, 19 ministries having a very well organized structure to do that work. The Treasury Ministry, Fernando Haddad, is doing the program for ecological transition in Brazil. Minister Fava, Minister Paulo Terceja, and Fernando Haddad, we have just launched the Safra plan, which is a basis for a transition to low carb agriculture. And I called it Safra Plan 1.0. It's a harvest plan because it is the beginning. We will have the 2.0 until we reach a moment in which our culture, our agriculture can be sustained. But we can't have 300 billion financing the same things. In this way, we will never do this transition because, just like you said, the resources donations is about millions, but when there is a return, there are billions and trillions. So just for you to have an idea, there is a report called Relatório das Duptas. It was done in the UK. Das Gupta, the Indian writer of that, while we are crawling to get 100 billion a year to do the investment for the transition the world needs with regards to climate change, we are still spending and investing something around 4 to 6 trillion in the economy that affects the increase of the global warming in the planet. And that's why companies are saying we are going to finance, but what are the commitments that you have with regards to this productive chain, this value chain? And this makes a difference. The government, when they launch the Safra plan and they say, the example is not so good because of 2008, but when they say, we are going to have the taker who is in the first A, the second A, and the third A. The triple A will be the one that will have a condition for a reduction in interest because it is traceable, they have certification, they have all the requirements that show that this player is in the virtuous path of this transition. And you will have that one which will have the basal way of working. And I could mention many other things here, but I would like to say that in this agenda of helping the investments to be safe so that we can invest in bioeconomy, bioindustry, creating new value changes, new products, new materials, and new solutions based on nature. In the case of the Amazon, we are doing PPC dam, which is 5.0. So this is the fifth version of it, and it has an innovation besides combating the illegal activities, sustainable development, and regulatory issues with the land. The Amazon still has 57,000 hectares of land that has to be regulated, not to convert it, not to use it for other activities. We want to have it for indigenous lands, the communities that live there, for also tourism activities in different modalities, reforestation. So in this agenda, in this plan of combat and intervention of deforestation in the Amazon, besides these four axes, there is also this one mentioned by William, the normative actions, the economic instruments or tools that can help us make the difference. The Amazon Bank cannot continue financing the old economy. The same goes for other financial instruments. And I should say that the efforts in control and command agenda are starting to give good results. We have managed it within these first 6 months with emergency actions. The Sedan is starting now, but we couldn't wait for the plan to be at full work. So we had some emergency actions. The deforestation is showing some fall. The rate we had according to DT data, it is preliminary data. It's not official yet because we are still having a variation in that, but we had a tendency of a fall of around 31%. Soon we will have the new data from DT, and we might have an even higher rate of decrease in deforestation. And this is a good sign because when you remove what should not be there, you have space to establish what must be there. So it is transition. You cannot make a region or a country sustainable from day to night. Unfortunately, we are late. We have to accelerate. We have to have a portfolio for infrastructure, for low carb agriculture, and for that, we need to have a prospective look. Without a prospective look, we won't get anywhere. We need to be not where the ball is. I have been saying that for about 20 years. We should be much ahead, but we are not as we would like to be. We are still in the hunger map. We are we were a country that had reduced deforestation in 83% for almost a decade. We were a country that had left this hunger map from 2003 to 2008. We were responsible for 80% of the protected areas in the world. This was a very important, the biggest reduction for the preservation of biodiversity compared to the rest of the world. Is it a lot? No, it's not. But other countries had done even less. We created hectares and hectares of units of conservation, and this means political decision, an ethical commitment against deforestation. So the policy is combat inequality. This is a historical agenda for the president. Strengthening of democracy, which is everyone's agenda, and sustainability. This is the three-legged basis that we have in the country. And as I am a minister for the third time now, I start to think when I went back, when I was 45 years old, I was a minister for the first time with many power plants which were paralyzed, and the president saying that he wanted to do the most complicated transition in the history of Brazil. That was a very difficult moment, the transposition of the San Francisco River. And since the time of Dom Pedro II, the emperor of Brazil, they wanted to do it. So this was only possible because we did it ethically. All the actions that we had against the government were won by the government. But when we use shortcuts, that costs a lot. This is called insecurity, law insecurity. You find a shortcut and then you say, well, Ibama gave us a license to do that. When we do it the right way, things truly happen. And I am very glad to be here with you in our foundation. My dear friend, Fernando Henrique Cardoso, our former president, when I arrived at the National Congress, when I was 35 at the time, the youngest senator in Brazil, the first trip that the president did to the Amazon, he invited me with Dr. Ruth, his wife. How can you take a senator from the opposition? And I felt free because Dr. Ruth Cardoso, she was a very special person in my life. And the trip that I made with Serra, Dr. Ruth, the investors, people from the central bank to Chicago, and it is not easy to debate there with the University of Chicago. And Dr. Dahuti said, well, we are going to do the debate for the investors. We are going to take Marina and Marco Aurelio Garcia to do the counterpoint of the debate. And people from PT said, are you going to go with his committee? I said, yes, she has invited me. It is not an unjust counterpoint. The things which are good, we will say which are good. And those which are not, we will mention that too. So when I proposed to President Fernando Henrique that he should create a subsidy for rubber to equalize the cultivated rubber in, for example, in Malaysia to protect more than 100,000 families, uh, the president said, Marina, are you going to tell me that? Then I said, don't say it is a subsidy. Say it is an environmental investment. And then he said, Eureka, call Pedro Parente there. Yes. And then Pedro got into the room, called Malan, and Malan asked the Monetary Fund Advisory Board. I was there with indigenous people, and then an indigenous person, they said, oh, she's allergic. You can't smoke this pipe. And he said, oh, I am sorry. But we left there having this subsidy and we created the first line there to subsidize rubber extraction. Serra defended that. Serra went there, defended it, and the project was unanimously approved. We want public policy. We want big public policy, a policy that will make a difference. We share the authorship, we share the realization of it and the recognition for what has been realized. And I have always said that that is my testimony because I am here in the foundation of this former president and my friend, Fernando Henrique Cardoso. We have had the best transition in the history of Brazil. And unfortunately, the meaning of that only appears later, as Lacan says. Now we all recognize that it was the best transition that we have ever had, uh, completely different from what we have had just now, a total discontinuity. Unfortunately, we have learned from this lesson that democracy is a constant construction. I can't have a project that is so wonderful but that only works only with me because the alternance of power only works with democracy. Thank you very much. Celso, there are many questions, but of course you can ask the first one. Well, I always think naturally in the diplomatic dimensions. And in this chapter, I think about the treaty for Amazon cooperation. It exists, it has had an important concern in the past. This is an important forum to take forward everything that we have talked about here. At the end of my management, we institutionalized the secretariat that is now in Brazil. And I think it is an additional step that can be given to set forward our theme Amazon forever. We have an ally here. Yes, it is an ally. It's been working with us. We are including technical resources, and we create many institutions, but a long time, sometimes they don't have resources. And when we think regionally, we somehow get these institutions back, trying to give it a basis of what they need. And of course, guests will be invited. Belém will have an important participation and we'll be there with them. Ilan, I propose the following. There is a set of questions, and my suggestion is that I ask all these questions, talking about the central themes, and as if I were throwing you balls, you can catch the ball that seems to be more suitable to you, and then you can develop this topic. It's not a topic for one or the other. So starting with a question that Carlos Américo Pacheco has sent us that has to do with science and innovation agenda. How does it articulate in the sustainable strategy for the Amazon area? I would like us to go a little further down to the concrete actions, of course, with regards to this guideline, but what are the projects, the initiatives that already exist and that deserve scalability and that have been somehow designed, it may be consolidated in a time which we can see forward. This is a concern that has been mentioned here. Rogério Marques also asks about urban policies, basically basic sanitation. And we have mentioned wrongly just Amazon, but this is a very heterogeneous space. It is so because it comprehends a number of cities with a very relevant population. It's also heterogeneous from the point of view that there is a core of the forest that has been preserved, and there is a surrounding in which there is a level of degradation, not just deforestation, and there are areas which have unfortunately been taken by cattle breeding. So this is a question for you, Minister. Looking at this situation, could you mention an initiative that could face the challenges respective to each of these problems mentioned? And finally, there are two more questions, and these, I believe, they are balls which are going more in the direction of the minister. A worry about the research and exploration of petrol in the river, in the Amazon River, along the equatorial border there, and the organized crime that has been an object of an article published yesterday at Estado de São Paulo. It wasn't, of course, a scoop by the newspaper, but they have written this article. I would like you to please tell us what the initiatives are for command and control or repression. And I have a concern as well for international cooperation. It doesn't seem that we can face organized crime in that region without international cooperation with the USA and with Europe, mostly with the USA, which is a market for the wood that is extracted here. The former minister, Ricardo Salles, has been informed about that. So this is a theme that that regards the national sovereignty. There is always this ghost that the old colonialism will take over our wealth. So I would like you to please react to those cooperation issues with the potencies of the North. Okay, I will go through all the questions you have said. That is a question from Rogério, from Pacheco. So I'm going to go through this. I think it is impossible to imagine any answer to the immense challenges that the world is going through from the point of view of the danger, and also with regards of that with to that which springs from situations as such. We have to see the role of the science in that. We need this urgency with regards to the Amazon, the climate, the protection of the natural basis of our development, due to the great contribution of science, which has manifested itself politically to the system. With regard to IPCC, sorry, when you talked about organized crime, I started confusing things. IPCC, which is the basis of all the formulation of processes of regulation, the ambitions of countries. Brazil will announce its NDC. We are working on that. Our commitments will be, of course, deepened. And without science, we wouldn't have that. Wouldn't have any of that. I would say that society did their part very well, even when it was under pressure. Who has not done yet their own part? Who are the companies, the investors, and the governments? We are indebted yet, but the society has been mobilized and is reporting to us, talking about the seriousness of the problem. And the more science evolves, the more we are able to answer this question. Science brings alternatives. I usually say that we have most of the technical answers. What is missing is the technical commitment to use this technique to make the difference. We know it's impossible. We know it's possible to produce energy from different sources. So where is it possible? Which is possible? The science has given its contribution, because there are those that even in adverse times have been able to invest in basic research, not just in applied research. Sometimes people say, why do these people are diverting, thinking about things which are not here yet? Well, those people are thinking about the future. So when the future comes, they will have the answer. We have a researcher from Embrapa Cerrado who developed the low carb agriculture concept. He has done a research for over 30 years. He was there at Embrapa Cerrado, and look what it has become. So now it is the great alternative for us to do the transition. So can you imagine if we had just remained there, researching only the agriculture of the current time without looking at the future? So science is fundamental, not just science from the notative postulates, but also the science that has been produced millenniums ago by traditional societies with regards to natural resources, um, and Professor Thomas Lovejoy, to mention a few. A person who has studied for more than 20 years has studied the Amazon. I have no prejudice against science. Science is searching for the truth, understanding that the truth will always be a partial one because it may change, but it is the truth of that moment. And we have to be humble to understand and recognize there are many other sciences. We have Museum Guild, we have the Institute of Research for the Amazon. We have Evandro Chaves Institute. We have a lot of research in the Amazon. And Brazil is an important research center in this region. Okay, basic sanitation was another issue. We have specialists who, of course, have been stating that this is fundamental for our well-being, even for the learning capacity of our kids, because they are affected. Their capacity is affected because they are susceptible to fever, diarrhea, diseases. And so this child, when still in the infant's age, they suffer from these diseases due to sanitation, be it due to their own structure or because they will miss classes and they will miss opportunities to develop themselves in the correct time. But unfortunately, we haven't invested yet, but this is a priority of Lula's government and the normative guidelines that we are creating and improving. Most people in the Amazon, for example, have no access to basic sanitation, considering that most of the population, 70%, is in the cities. If we don't make the difference there, we are not talking about sustainable development there. The Amazon, the different realities in the Amazon. We know there is an area that has been converted. There is an area that has suffered. The forest is there. There was cutting of the forest. There was a lot of impoverishing of that forest. And of course, areas which are massive forestations, these forest areas, they cannot be destined to economic activities. So we have policies. When you think about areas that have been degraded, we have an initiative in the government, but the government is working as a whole to do concessions for the recovery of these degraded areas, be it for wood products or not. But at the moment, we are doing the first one in the Mata Atlântica, and so that this area can get these concessions and for 30 and 40 years do the recovery of this area, sell the carbon credits, and be able to reforest the area with profitable but important agriculture. These areas that can be managed, areas that have to be permanent preservation, you have to recover that with native species, and we have political policies for each of them. With regards to forests, the former government, for example, considered about 300,000 hectares of forest for public concessions. This year, we are going to do 1 million hectares. 300,000 hectares were done in the former government. We want to generate jobs. The government has a program in partnership with the private sector. And instead of the private sector acquiring area to do reforestation, the concessions help them in that path. We are working also in partnership with different sectors so that we can have a very impressive program for reforestation. 12 million is our target. And of course, we have the seed collectors, you have the biologists, you have the technicians, you will have an economy of restoration. These are programs that we are working on. And there's also another question. I am sorry, I'm trying to read the question that was asked. Okay, the last question that was done to us, I'm sorry. Yes, it was about petroleum. I'm sorry. I made a mistake here. Sorry. Yes, this is God's absence. Well, yes, Lacan and Freud explain that. Exploration of exploitation of petrol in the equatorial margin. Well, the process of licensing shouldn't be made easier or more difficult. It's a technical process. So the IBAMA technicians, with the request that had been made by the entrepreneur, that was in that case Petrobras, but before it was a private company, to make a well there, judged it was insufficient, whatever was presented there as alternatives for mitigation, or even in case an accident happened, that it was insufficient in such a sensitive area, and said no to that license. This is very natural in any process of licensing. The entrepreneur may also present a newer project with new studies that will be technically analyzed once again and will be answered to accordingly. There are many different lots. Well, some people say, well, this plot of land is about 500 meters, but the proposal is something about 200 plots in this equatorial margin. So there are many wells that will be dug in each of them. So the technicians have first suggested that should be done environmental evaluation, OAS, I think. And this is pertinent according to what science and public policies based on evidence place as a minimum request, because such a sensitive area as the river Amazon, for you to have all this intervention, you can't do a licensing for every well that is going to be perforated. You need to look at the whole set of wells and see if this is low intensity or this is medium intensity or high intensity, and has to be excluded with regard to the environment. When President Dilma was there, we had a mechanism like that, and we removed from the auctions the areas that couldn't be licensed so that we wouldn't have a problem with the entrepreneur. Nowadays, when you look at what is available permanently for a person to try to run for that, we have abrolhos, for example. Do you think that they will get a license to explore petroleum in abrolhos? Of course not. This, this of course, is against our image. This has to be excluded from the list of possibilities. Consensus of ethics would tell us that it is impossible to do it that. So the technicians have recommended it like that. New studies will be presented. This is normal. But my orientation was, I don't position myself beforehand, because the license is not political to say yes or no. Along IBAMA's lifespan, about 2,000 licenses, Sueli. If these 2,000 licenses were technical, one license that has been denied cannot be due to ideological issues. They are technical procedures that are observed. I have, for example, another example, which is regarding precaution. We had a problem and we sent it in the case of Belo Monte because we wanted to check that. So you have to see that the sum has to add up correctly. Viability is social, cultural, technical. So in Xingu, for example, everything that is happening there with the indigenous people there has to be seen, the violence there, everything that was involved in that equation. So wise are those who learn from the mistakes of others, but we also have to learn with our own mistakes. So that is my position. I will not manifest myself. I will not manifest my opinion saying I'm against or in favor. Technicians are looking at that and will give their verdict. You will not tell someone at Anvisa that if chloroquine doesn't work for COVID, Anvisa has to say that it does. This is how it should be. Anvisa is the one that should say if chloroquine works or not. There are problems, yes, but I think I have concluded, I think I have answered all these questions here. Amazon forever, yes, we have also talked about that. Okay, okay, a round of applause, yes. Okay, we agree on many of these points. I loved it. I'd like to answer a few questions about crime. Ah, I'm sorry, I skipped that. I'm sorry, I skipped about organized crime. I talk too much, guys. I'm sorry. The problem is that nowadays it's very different from 20 years ago. It was very difficult what we have been through to get those results. But nowadays there is an incomparable complexity when compared. Besides exploitation of these criminal organizations who are in the region, we have endogenous criminal organization, Bonde dos 13, and many processes which are very difficult to deal with. We haven't detected, according to the satellite data from the federal police, we have not detected any new intervention for mineration in this past 30 days. But there is, of course, a remaining of mining connected to criminal organization. There was a decree by the president for a new phase. This involves persistency, state work, partnership between the state government, and a lot of intelligence and alternatives for the population not to become a hostage to that. It is very difficult for the youngsters, for example, because they are being sucked in, they are being recruited by these criminals, and this constitutes a very dangerous situation. Okay, I would just like to complement that. I'd like to answer this question about science and innovation. I think a premise for that we have to evaluate in any area with evidence, with data. It may seem obvious that we have to look at evidence, but many times we have the data, many times we have the evidence, but it's not so clear that we will use the evidence for the policies that we want. I'll give an example. Since I started at the International Development Bank, so there's a bus in which we talk about resources. What are you doing in Manaus? Okay, we are lending 2 million. What are you doing with public science? Well, we have 1 billion there. And when you look at that, we have a lot of different kinds of resources with little emphasis on the final result, the impact. Of course, when there are many indicators in different areas, it is hard for you to account for all of them, but we have to change the logic. We have to check what in fact you are changing. How many lives are you affecting in terms of sanitation? How much money do you have for that? This, just for you to start the idea of science, this doesn't exist if we don't give enough emphasis to data, to indicators that you are using for change. And we have in science and innovation, I would like to talk about that first, and I'd like to finish with that as well, if possible. For innovation, you need risk-taking capacity. You need to do things that sometimes may not work. And I think we have to take this risk somehow because these are the risks that bring in positive externalities. And you can change the capacity for management, the public policy that you haven't thought about before. And there are some questions. The public sector as a whole, but this time I was thinking about development banks where you can actually take this risk to yourself. We have the case called BitLab. It is an innovation arm from the International Development Bank, and there are many initiatives in the Amazon area as well. I can give a few examples, but I would like to talk about this case in the Amazon, which is as we want to work on different levels, not just control, not just financing, but we want also to work on innovations. We are creating a network of research institutes. Well, I would like to invite you, Nelson, to participate, and Leticia as well, because it is a preparatory phase for Belém. We are going to work with research institutes on this issue, how they can help. Technology, there are many. For example, there is a map, 360 map. We are creating this map to see each bit of the Amazon, what initiatives are there, how they are working. This, we need partners, we need to work with Google, the private sector, for us to have a tool that is unbelievably important if you want to use it to work in the region, and without even mentioning the connectivity, which is not leaving any place behind in terms of digitalization. So I think this is fundamental. Innovation is fundamental there. Once again, everything has many aspects. For example, cities. You can't leave cities aside. If you look at the census, you will see that Manaus has grown a lot. The average cities in Brazil have grown. The population has not increased so much, but these cities have increased. So we can't abandon these cities. So once again, our contribution, aggregate a platform of the cities so that together they can be with us. This is an effort. Organized crime. So IDB, it has a security unit. Well, usually the public banks security is somewhere else, but we know we have a unit of security, maybe because we deal with Latin America. It's not because someone would have to have invented it if we didn't have it. So, for example, the Ministry of Justice, the minister has asked us to help fight the organized crime in the Amazon. But what we want is not these different sorts of requests. We have to think, because when I meet an authority, not just in Brazil, I ask them, Amazon forever, let's work on that. Yes, but you will have to solve the organized crime problem. So the defense of the Amazon and solving organized crime is one issue. For other countries, we are talking separately about people, cities. But for some countries, the border is a true problem because we have a jurisdiction up to there. But as of there, we don't. So I think it's obvious who I am talking about. So we have to deal with the problem of crime. It cannot be ignored. And I think you commented a little bit about the carbon market. So I would like to engage on a question sent by Marcelo Brito. This question, our problem in the Amazon is not offer, it is demand and access to market, logistics, governance. How can we scale, give scalability to some local vocations? So, for example, the social economic viability of rubber extraction and the processing of products which are typical of the Amazon. What is the example that we have? Açaí, it's a fruit that we have here in Brazil, which is sold everywhere. Some people say, who exports high technology? Okay, the usual suspects are there. So how can you scale? Is it possible to scale extractivism? Mota Vega and Sandra Hills have done a study that can show us a little bit about that. So you are the guy who has opted to study the science of scarcity. Okay, later I'll talk about economy. No, 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 hold on, hold on. This is my specialty. Dismal science, yes. Okay. Uh, I think it's good now because one of the problems that we have is that if we don't tangibilize that, society will not engage. Even though the titles are great, the phrases are great. So I would like to know what the bank can actually do to give it scalability and make sustainable solutions feasible in the Amazon. And what have you thought about that? Do you have a project, a number of projects? Do you have a detention of initiatives for that? Celso will like this. So Ortega Gasset, he went to Argentina and he was enchanted by the rhetoric capacity of the Argentinian. Let me provoke you a little. Then he said, Argentinian, two things, let's do it, let's do it. So if we don't tangibilize it, you won't convince people. Interesting that in many forums, they are verbalizing that. Let's stop talking. Parole, parole. No, let's implement things. So that's what we have to actually work on. What do you do? In my opinion, focus. If you are going to create a carbon market, how is it going to be? What is the structure that we have to change? What happens is we have a lot of priorities. Each of us has their own fund, their own budget, and you have the city that asks for something, demands something, and at the end of the day, you don't tangibilize it. Why? Because it is dispersed, it is scattered. So first of all, you need to organize the mass, let's say. I could never translate it into English or Spanish. When I say let's organize the mass, I couldn't translate that because the meaning of this expression in Portuguese is to sit down and check our priorities. Let's say it would be let's tidy up. And many people understand the priority being like, I won't do the things I don't want to. No, no, priority is not that. Among the things we would like to do, some of them we want to do less than others because otherwise we will not be able to change and find the spaces where you can actually generate a market there. So this is where we would like to work on. I mentioned many initiatives today where we want to get in, but can't go into control and monitoring and forget the people. And we can't forget the economy, for example, using the dismal science, because to bring people in, we have to find the subsistence. We have to find the balance point. That's what we have to work on at the bank. That is it. Do you accept this provocation, Minister? Well, I like this provocation that we can present concrete things. I was in many different government posts, and then when I spoke, people said, "Okay, now let's get down to business. What is concrete?" Why? Because people want answers. But I think that we talk about tangibilization with regard to Amazon, to the Amazon in two levels. One part is very tangible, feasible, and we have to work with that. The feasible or tangible that would be done ready. I don't know how I would translate that. It's something that is done, but it's ready. It is the forest itself. I think it would be something like ready-made. I don't speak English, I speak Senegalese. Okay, so that is the ready-made, which is the forest itself. And this is tangible, this is feasible. The forest produces ecosystem services which are indispensable to the well-being of the planet. It is important for the rain system, which is related to 75% of the Latin America GDP. Do you want anything that is more tangible than that? Well, are there things which have to be tangibilized? Yes, because the forest is very generous in giving us all that, but it would need 50,000 Itaipus to be able to pull out this water, which is an unmanageable project. We couldn't build 50 power plants like Itaipu. The forest does that. It pumps in all this water and then helps us have all this water in the area through rain. So we have to educate ourselves what is indispensable to maintain the planet alive. And also added to that, what is tangible, what can become a product, a chain of value, and so on and so forth, which is your effort. When we talk about acai, for example, in Braille, have we looked at other possibilities? I keep thinking about these communities which have knowledge associated to so many products and so many species of fruit that we never verify if they can be scaled up. This also comes from technology and innovation, but they have been identified. So we can think the forest itself, specialists or experts say it is more profitable there than if we destroy it to create, for example, to breed cattle. So let's think about all the plants and wood there. Only in that we have a great amount of wealth for us to manage, but we have to do that wisely. Is it possible for us to have tourism in the Amazon? Is it possible to have scientific tourism there? Yes, it's also possible. Is it possible to do an experiential kind of tourism there? Yes, it's all possible. It is possible to create museums. All that is possible. Amazon has many possibilities of generating wealth, and all this is tangible. It has a beauty that is priceless. It has an image, acoustic beauty. It is an explosion of things. How can we make that feasible and tangible? Maybe some other regions which won't have the same types of appeals. How can they be so visited? So what is going on in the way in which we are approaching the issue of tourism, for example? So I liked the story of risk. There must be a certain risk. There is some Darwinism there, to mention Darwin here. There must be some pioneers, and pioneers will risk. We can't waste money. We have to do things as right as possible. The ministry has created bioeconomy minister so that we can leverage whatever has more potential to aggregate value, to add value, and become a productive chain associated to bioindustry, cooperatives, the efforts of communities, developers, investors, all this process. The bioeconomy secretariat has been created, and Minister Haddad is doing a macro effort for us to be able to get into the frame that is necessary. Maybe we are suffering from the repetition melody. Maybe this takes us to difficult situations sometimes, but because everything that gives us a good response, we tend to repeat. So what were the first types of success? It was wood. So pau-brasil has unfortunately been extinct. So now we only have 8, 9, 10%. The Amazon seem to be infinite, but 19% of it, 20% of it is gone. 25% is the point of no return. So we have to identify. Salo Kozlov has done a study together with Amazon, IPAN. These incredible people have identified a series of products that could be used for these new investments to create these new value chains. On the other hand, there is a part which is more conventional. The other day, a person was telling me that they had an excess of pirarucu and they had no market for that fish. It's one of the tastiest fish that I have seen in my life. Why are people cultivating lakes? We have our freshwater cod and we can't sell pirarucu. So Peru teaches us many things. They have managed to get the Peruvian cuisine something attractive that makes people want to go there and feel motivated to get to know the country due to their cuisine. Why don't we do the same? We have a vocation somehow to place the lamp under the table. We shouldn't place the lamp under the table. We have to place it above our heads. We have to light, make the place filled with light. And there's a lot that we have to do. And there is a youth there. There is a number of startups that you will find if you do an ethnography of all these little investments. If you do that, you will look and you will say, wow, with all technology, with all economists, all the risk margins, I think this one will be good for investment. You will find one. You will find at least 20 products which are ready to be scaled, but you have to see that the community has to supply for that. You need to have a continuity of that. So that's why I am proposing to create a suffer plan, a harvest plan for the bioeconomy. That is one for agribusiness, for family agriculture. Let's do a pro forest with resources so that we can do the right investments. And this list, I can give you the lists of the innovations in the Amazon that we have with us. Each one that you look is fantastic, but it's great to look. Minister, I think it was worth provoking you. You are here among allies, friends. At least I can say that with regard to myself. It is important to be clear that what do we know that we know? The experience and science have already shown us that it is possible to do. And there are a number of things that we know, and we have to be emphatic about that. One of the things that we do know, that we know, is that the indigenous lands bordering is important, essential to the environment. I think it is a mistake to say that indigenous people have too much land. 98% are within the legal Amazon, and studies prove that the demarcation of land is one of the institutional tools from the point of view of ordering of territory most effective with regard to controlling the deforestation. We have to be clear about what we know and what we don't know yet completely. The possibilities that exist in this area of extractivism. We don't have information enough about extraction. And of course, there are things that we don't know that we don't know. And this is a bit of the fun of life. But I would like to say, just to finish, that I hesitated a little to provoke, but then I was very glad with the consequence of this provocation. Ah, yes, you have taken the risk to yourself. Yes, I have. If you want to finance my risk-taking step here, I think we have to finish because we have exceeded in terms of time. So first, I would like to say that we are your allies and we are your admirers. I want to thank Ilan that is following Ortega's advice, a las cosas, which means let's do it, and the idea of focus that you have highlighted seems to be very important. To govern is to choose, and to manage is also to choose. And this is what you are proposing to do. I'd just like to do a final observation. Having had some diplomatic experience in this area, it is evident that there are some fundamental factors to transform Brazil, which is a great potency to become an actor, effective actor. We need to have a knowledge diplomacy. You need to have the domain of the subjects. You need to know what can be transmitted as being the best way. And I think the discussion we have had today has been a contribution to this diplomacy of knowledge, which is a condition, which is a fundamental condition for the proper insertion of Brazil into the world. And besides that, there is always the symbol theme, what the person incarnates. And of course, our dear minister has this charisma and this respectability and the respect for her work, which is fundamental. And Ilan, of course, without being apt in Senegalese, which is one of the languages that our minister speaks. So you are trying to do the bids. The language of bids is, of course, mixed with Yiddish. No, we haven't reached that yet. It's a question of time to have a language, a bank language. So we thank you so much. We thank our two guests here. We also thank Sergio that has conducted this. And we thank you all for having been here and those who are representing the countries here and who prove the importance of this theme in the international scenario. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. And we would like more than 250 people who have been watching us on the app. Thank you on the Nuvem.